enough of all the technical talking. Let's get into showing value to executives, right? That's what we're all about here. Everybody wants to know how valuable their security automation program is. It's a little bit of that. Obviously, this is rooted in being able to make sure that people understand the time and effort that you're putting into automation. And I think it's a little bit more than that as well. So, something I've created recently is called the Automation Capability Matrix. I've written a couple blogs about it so far. It's an idea that I had after talking with a ton of different people, customers, folks in the industry, and really let me just start off with a poll, right? Has anybody used the MITRE ATT&CK framework here? And okay, so that seems like a lot. Who doesn't know what it is, the MITRE ATT&CK framework? Nice, great. I like that. A little? That doesn't get that much use out of it? Great, awesome. Hey, that's great. So what I think is really interesting about MITRE ATT&CK is, a lot of people are starting to align with it. It's a very descriptive way of saying, these are the attacks that maybe threat actors are doing and how they apply to blue team activities. And it's really been great at merging those two worlds. It's really descriptive into saying an attacker would usually execute this for initial access, go on and go into an execution phase where they're going to run a bunch of their bad scripts and things, and eventually exfil data and totally ransomware your company and things like that. That's been really good, and I come from a managed security services background where I would kind of lead our customers in this to say, hey, these data sources are the most valuable to you to be able to detect these attacks, or to say, getting your Oracle server logs into your SIEM shouldn't be priority number one, which is actually really hard to convey to some people, right? So that's all fine, but and that's not to say that that wasn't valuable to that organization, right? It's just I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, maybe your EDR will say, hey, there's malware on this host, and your Oracle logs are going to say this transaction occurred on this row, and balance those two out and make sure everybody understands the trade-off there. So that was really effective to me from a services provider viewpoint to say, hey, this is how we should prioritize what we're doing for logging or for threat detection or anything like that. And switching over into the security automation space, I really struggled to find anything that was kind of that same framework to I don't know, either set my mind in that place where I was, or to convey what is all possible through automation. And so what I set off to create about 6 months ago was the Automation Capability Matrix, and it will look a little bit like this. It looks a little bit like MITRE ATT&CK for those who are familiar, but what it is it's a set of techniques designed to help security operations team understand their automation capabilities and respond more effectively to incidents. Just straight reading from the slide. I think that's the aim, to try and see what we're going to be able to accomplish. And through this, you'll be able to say, hey, these are my automation opportunities. These are the things that I could think about, right? Maybe these apply to my organization, maybe they don't. Maybe what are other organizations doing? How you can read the automation capability matrix is top to bottom, left to right, a little opinionated, just like MITRE ATT&CK did in some ways. What I am doing that's a little bit different is this top to bottom being opinionated about what you should go and automate first, right? And think of it from the standpoint of you're just starting a security operations program, you have nothing, right? And that could be the case for a number of new companies or companies that just have never prioritized security operations. Even if you don't have any security tool, and an example of this, even if you don't have any security tooling and you haven't you haven't set up any alerts or anything like that, the second you register a domain, somebody's basically going to know that that domain was registered, and they could just as easily like send an email to finance@newdomain.com or something asking for money, right? So that's why we're putting phishing alerts at the very top left of this, because everybody's gonna have to deal with phishing no matter what. But then you can also work your way down and say, okay, after like taking a look at understanding like what phishing alerts, either from a security mail gateway or an abuse box or anything like that, where can I kind of work down next? So I think a lot of people have endpoint alerts. You might have like a never-ending SIM project that's always evolving. That exists. And then, yeah, you know, switch all these up depending on what applies to you. Some people are on-prem, some people are in the cloud. That's why you can like change where everything should be. And then, yeah, work left to right and say, okay, once you get your phishing alert, create a tracking, like create a ticket, do some enrichment, and reach out to users. So within each of these tiles, each of these capabilities, this is what, when you click into one, this is what the capability will look like. So at the very top, we'll have the title of what the capability is. There will also be some metadata. I'm really thinking about this to grow over time. So right now, we just have basically an ID and the category, so you can filter on, say, I just want to like understand all the capabilities of this category. But I'd really, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but think of that growing to say, here's the tools that support this category, or you can, to do IP lookup or asset lookup, you'll query your CMDB, and you know, ServiceNow might be an example of this CMDB. Then there's a description, and I'm really kind of proud of the descriptions more than anything, because honestly, when we released this just a couple weeks ago, I had a number of people coming back to me saying, I'm new to security, I just joined a security team, and a lot of my coworkers and people, they're just talking about security like everybody knows everything, right? You can kind of take some of these keywords in the title or these thoughts, and you can start understanding better, like, what does this capability or what does this process in security operations actually mean, and digest that a little bit more. But then you have your techniques, how you would actually like go and apply this. So it's not just like you have this tool, but the other part of this framework is that it's very tool agnostic, so you don't need a specific, like, you don't need CrowdStrike, you don't need this or that. You can kind of fit in whatever. Hopefully techniques will be this field where you can say, this is the type of like thinking that I would do. I would like reach out to this tool and pull back this field or something like that. Techniques will hopefully provide a lot of that context for people to say, okay, I understand what's actually, how to actually apply this in some ways. And then at the bottom, since it's our framework, as much as I want to like open this up to everybody, and we'll get there, I do like to just say like, here's a time store library entry to say, okay, 2 clicks, you can get this in, and you can kind of like start working with how it can implement this capability. So why is it important? Look, visualization is everything in security operations, or when you're trying to tell other people about what you're actually doing. It's so often that you'll implement something very technical, very worthwhile, spend a whole lot of time on it, but if somebody else can't read code, or if somebody can't understand like the full gravity of it, and only a picture will suffice at that point, right? I think for each capability that we have, there might be some overlap or some synergies in between, but really overall it just kind of gives a whole new realm of automation ideas that maybe you're implementing a lot of a certain category, but not all of them. And so you can then start to explore like, oh, if I want to mature this type of category, I can keep going down the line, implement these new things, try out like these new ideas, because ultimately that was important to me, but I just didn't know that it could be automated. Again, it's a very tool agnostic approach, just like MITRE ATT&CK, but if you know MITRE ATT&CK like really deep, there's data sources listed in each technique in MITRE ATT&CK. Think of this sort of like that, to have like these specific tools that will provide IP enrichment, or the Slack messages, the user messaging that we've kind of seen today. And then we'll get into the demonstrating value to stakeholders, how you can kind of utilize the matrix here in a second. And again, like my vision for this is to make this digestible through data, just like MITRE ATT&CK is, and be able to like make it something your own, be flexible enough that you can come up with your own solutions based on it. Yeah, so where we're gonna kind of get to, we launched it, we're getting a lot of really good feedback, we're gonna iterate on it a couple more times. One of the pieces of metadata that I'd love to include now in each of the categories is like a product or a service, or like a category of tooling that you would need, but then also be able to say what are the capabilities, like filter on that, say what are the capabilities does the EDR impact, or like what can your threat intel platforms actually provide to you. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the threat reports put out by Red Canary, CrowdStrike, but they do a great job of digesting all the attacks that they've seen in blue teams and red teams, and saying these are the most commonly used techniques that occur in the wild. Say you should prioritize like command line execution and logging all of those attacks that occur. I want to be able to do the same thing, bring back to all of you to say, hey, these are the top automation capabilities you should automate first within Tines. And also like be able to stack rank it across verticals or like type of customer, right? So if you're just starting out, maybe Slack Ops is like your #1 thing, but as you grow and as you involve more teams, you'll need to rely more on email alerts to say, this team doesn't use Slack, or they use Teams or something else, and you'll have to like grow those capabilities as well to be able to interact with those teams more. And then ultimately what I'd love to do, I guess, how many people have gotten use out of the story library already? Yeah? Nice, great. I'd love to build this closer into the product, and so when we have story library entries out there, we'll be able to say this story library entry will provide these capabilities to your organization. The second you import that and you publish that story, we can roll that up and say, okay, now I have these capabilities in use, and this is why, or it's providing this many runs or this much usage to my organization, and I'm getting that much value from this capability, and be able to, ultimately report to somebody and say, this is why this story is valuable. And maybe conversely, you can say, this is why I'm not getting a lot of use out of this particular story either. So this is just a picture, as I mentioned, of the Red Canary threat report for 2022. Think of this as kind of a way of what I'm looking to bring through the automation capability matrix eventually. We have the top techniques that are used and what % of customers that they see impacted by those techniques. There's even a heat map up there. They're able to say, here are the top threats to all environment, and be able to say that this is like our top attack that we've been seeing, and the number of customers affected, right? So really, really cool stuff, and they're able to do this at scale. I think we should be able to do that at times with our unique perspective and bring that value to you all as well. So let's get into a capability deep dive. And this slide kind of got messed up. Okay, well, where is it? So let me just say, like user interaction is one of the capabilities that we're talking about. Who uses Slack and automation to help their team, right? So now that this is kind of like the live version of the threat report, of the automation report. So if you were to use this story that if you were to use this distributed decision-making story and be able to send alerts to anyone in your organization, you might be capturing capabilities 4002, 4005, 4006, 4007. And that's only through like one story. They're able to capture those capabilities. Now if I go back to the capability matrix, so we have something for chat alerts. So 4002 is just sending chat alerts to an individual or to a team saying, hey, like this alert just came in. Then what we'll go to is 4005, security team response. So like Chris was showing, Chris was showing user response, right? So he's actually going to reach out to the user, say, hey, was this you? Instead of just the security team saying, okay, we want to investigate more in this alert. Actually go out to the specific users and say, hey, like, can you triage this for me? So take that off your team. As we kind of go down this user interaction category, we're also being very opinionated on how we should go about it. So we're going to start with email alerts. So instead of having to like set up Slack or Teams or anything like that, we'll start with just sending emails straight up. Then we'll move on to chat alerts. So send it to a channel. Web form responses, something that we'll get into here in just a little bit with our new feature release in some aspects. And then we'll kind of move to security team response, user notifications, user response, and we'll just kind of keep going down the line and adding new capabilities to our organization. So what can you do with it? So that's how the capabilities are applied in Tines. That's how you can read the capabilities. But this is where I think it's going to be the most effective, right? So as I've been talking about, all these fit together in some way. I think this is a really great way of describing how all of your capabilities fit together. Stories are really complex in Tines. It's not just this story did this one thing and I stopped there. It's fitting together, receiving an alert, doing some enrichment, reaching out to a user, creating a ticket, enriching, responding to that ticket, all that kind of stuff. So what we have here in the example is we'll start with phishing alerts, and every phishing alert or every security email gateway alert that comes in, we'll create a tracking location. We've seen that twice today with Jira and GitHub, right? And then we'll want to do some enrichment on that alert. So the phishing email will have attachments. You might want to do some file hash analysis on those attachments. And this is a very basic phishing workflow just for demonstration purposes, but any links within that phishing email, you'll want to pull those out and do some domain analysis, say, is this a known phishing website? You might also want to do some security data search. So go back to your SIM and say, hey, have I seen this email before? Who else has gotten this email? Understand the scope of where it's been. Or you could even use that for saying, hey, have we seen this URL before? Seen this file hash before? And know where it is in your organization. Once you have that enrichment done and recorded back in your ticket, then you can either, you can reach out to your security team, say there's been a new phishing event registered, somebody's reported a new phishing attack. That could be the abyss box again, or it could just be here's the new alert that came in from the secure email gateway. But then what I also find a lot of teams are kind of missing or find really difficult to do is actually reach back out to the user and say, hey, this alert that came in, or this report of phishing that you had, it was good or it wasn't. But really, and that's a step in itself to actually respond back to the users on phishing reports. But also doing that in a timely manner is really hard to do. So if you're doing all of this manually and not through automation, every phishing report could be, okay, I have to download this attachment, I have to pierce through the email headers, I have to do the domain analysis, I have to explode the executables in the email attachment or something like that, right? All that takes so much time. And in between the time when that user reported that phishing or like really when like even the email alert comes in, if it's not user reported, that's an opportunity for the user to actually click on it, do some really malicious things, like have a problem really happen, all while you're doing this over and over for every single phishing report. Like you're going through that process. So the user notification piece, especially when applied to phishing, is like through automation such a valuable part of it, and getting like good verdicts back to users can make all the difference when doing your phishing process. And then once you even like just do that, like if you have some suspicious indicators, get those, use the remediation categories, get those into a domain block list, get those into like application whitelisting if you're able to do that, and be able to like actually knock down the attacks a little bit more, be proactive about it. Look, remediation can be really hard for a lot of organizations. It's not something that many organizations will like kind of do when they're first starting out, but I think you kind of grow into it, and that's what the automation capability matrix will also help people do, is say, okay, I've implemented all these capabilities. What are the first remediation steps that I can take, and be opinionated on that and say, blocking IPs, probably fine. You can add an IP to a block list, put that in the firewall. If somebody complains, yank it out. Not a lot of harm done. As you're kind of going along, maybe you'll grow into isolating hosts in CrowdStrike, or taking assets off the network, and being a little bit more confident as you kind of grow your capability program. And really, when it all comes down to it, what I'm hoping to achieve through this is being able to report, we implemented these capabilities, and they provide this value to my organization, right? So what you'll see at the top here, we have all these like ideas. These aren't even capabilities at the very top, they're just like ideas, right? So send Teams messages, send Slack messages, detonate an executable. Like, how do I translate this into like an actual program, right? And so through that, we'll put it through the recombobulator, and we'll say, issue tracking 2006, 2005, 2001. This is how I'm splitting my time saved, my mean time to response, doing the process, so just like actually going out and like doing the actual thing that we're talking about, not just time saved, but like everything that goes into your day-to-day and like being distracted and going over here. Through automation, it'll save you that time. User interaction, so we have send Teams messages, send Slack messages, and send emails. So I would categorize send emails a little bit differently than sending chat messages, but my organization uses Teams and Slack, right? Like that's actually a common thing out there, right? Because you get Teams for free, but everybody would rather prefer use Slack. So how do you roll all that up, those two automation stories, into a combined like message of what this capability is? And then you have enrichment, right? And you keep building on and saying, hey, this part of my program, like maybe we're doing a little too less enrichment, or like we should do more remediation, or we don't even get to remediation that often. Hopefully this will be an outlet to be able to put all that together in a valid story for your leadership. So looking at the automation capability matrix, we might be missing some things, we might not. We're constantly iterating on it, we're gonna keep growing it. Early in reviewing it, we saw the SOC automation capability matrix. I was very deliberate in calling out that this is probably an automation capability matrix just for SOC teams, because as I kind of went along in developing it, I realized that what a SOC cares about is a lot. There's a lot of things that like could be automated in a SOC, but there's also a lot of things that maybe HR doesn't care about in that, or finance, or vulnerability management, or DevOps, or red team, right? And so I think like doing other capability matrices as a company potentially in the future, as we kind of like maybe grow our market or things like that, just know that like, yes, this was dedicated for security operations teams. I think that's who's going to find the most value about it right now. But we might go into these other kind of runs as well. If you want to get involved though, yeah, this is kind of like my brainchild. This is what I want to base a little bit of our Tides research strategy around. Think like I want to get the community more involved, get more like feedback. Even today, I've even heard a couple like comments say, hey, like I think I do this, or like I would think about it this way differently, which was completely valid. I want to get it into a structured data format, so if anybody's ever worked with PyAttack, it's basically like a big JSON blob of what the matrix is, and you're able to like create your own solutions around it, which is really cool. What's going to be the biggest thing coming up is creating like an interactive visualization builder, so you'll be able to tell that phishing story on your own. You'll be able to like highlight boxes and say, my phishing process involves these things, but then my vulnerability management process like involves these other things, and we have this overlap of like, again, these stories can get really complex and reuse components in Tides. How do you link that all together and say, this is how much use I get out of sending Slack messages or anything like that? One thing that's come up last week, a lot of people have been asking me for threat reports based around the automation capability matrix. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but it would be nice if you have like a detailed threat report given to your organization saying, you know, this ATP, or this attacker usually does these certain things. How can automation help me when, if I'm concerned about that kind of threat? And usually, like initially I kind of thought like somebody attacking you, that's kind of a one-off, or like, you know, they'll have very specialized techniques in use, and automation's really good for like opening up cases and doing like the routine stuff. But the more I thought about it, it was like, this is the point of when you should do enrichment based on these IOCs, or this is the point of when you should isolate a host, or this is the point when maybe this other capability would be involved. So really looking forward to doing a little bit more of that. And then kind of as we go in Tides Labs, just orient our content towards the automation capability matrix and think really deeply about like, this is why these stories, why these automation workflows that we're building actually matter, and be able to relate that at a bigger scale. So that's the automation capability matrix. Again, a couple blogs out there so far, just launched, so I would love any feedback, and yeah, thank you. Questions? Yep.
What's the difference between the black icon and the blue icon in your matrix?
Yeah, so as we've kind of like gone along, it's been really nice to realize what we don't, at times, like we don't have like great examples of blocking an email sender today. So it's anything with a blue icon is just something that we don't have an entry for in the story library right now, and it's basically posing as prioritization for us to say, here's the things that I would love to like make sure everybody knows how to be able to do in Tides.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
How do you see it being integrated more deeply to the product? Like, if you wanted to produce a report at the end of the year, right, we could go into our stories and there's just a field for mapping to the matrix. I don't know how you would anonymize the data, but you could pull that data from our stories and then just produce a report of every customer.
Yeah, and without like kind of getting too into the, like, I'm watching everything that you're doing or anything like that, but you know, yeah. Woo, cloud, no, I'm just kidding. So if we tag things in the story library, I have a lot of really good data on these are the most used use cases that people find compelling. Obviously there's another layer to this of like, did you publish a story? Are you getting like routine use out of it? And really like, and I'm fine with this. If you were to like delete that story and make a different one with all the same actions, like then I don't know that that was the story that you downloaded. I don't think that necessarily happens too much. Like I think the general idea of like changing a story happens quite frequently. So like take this base template, change 80% of it, and this is your like new workflow. But like the primitives there still exist. So I think that's where my mind kind of goes on like doing that threat report, but also like just working with people and kind of doing surveys or things like that as well. Yep.
What about doing a times wrapped at the end of every quarter?
Yeah, every quarter.
For reporting to leadership, kind of like how many story executions occurred for each portion of the capability matrix.
Yeah.
Saying like, yeah, I mean like those are numbers we could also, once you categorize it, we could pull manually, but it also might be nice as like, if it's already being built into times, to be able to say like, we executed user notification 600 times this quarter.
Yeah.
Based on like what everything we automated across the environment.
Yeah, and I think again it's like layering that on with user notification saved this much time as well, and like per execution this is how much time like we cut down, right? Things like that. I can't tell the future, but like where I'd love to get to is to be able to include some of that in the product or have a tool to be able to pull that like yourselves, right? I think a wrapped or like doing something like higher level might be like more of a yearly thing, but in some ways that's like exactly the same, like unless you're talking about like for you specifically, but I think at higher level, just all organizations taking a sampling and understanding like what everybody's doing will help give everybody else like, oh, I should start implementing this, or like this is how much things have changed over time. I don't know what I'm curious about is like how much the common capabilities might change year to year. I'm not sure about that. I think it would probably stay the same. So it'd be like looking at deeper data of like maybe people are actually switching out Slack for Teams or something like that. Great. Well, yeah, thank you, and happy to chat more. You want a more deeper explanation on the capability matrix. Thank you.